Chapter 5. Present Day, Kenzi. The night of the Christmas party kept playing in Kenzi's mind as she followed her GPS to the address Blaine had given her for his cabin. That had been the night she met him. And though she'd only seen him a few times since, he'd played a starring role in her mind. There was just something about him that made her so curious. There was this hidden depth to him, something holding him back. She was both excited and worried about her mental health in taking this job. What if he hated what she did? What if she found out some horrible secret about him? There must be some reason he was a serial dater and had never ventured into a meaningful relationship. What if she found out the reason and it changed her view of him? She gripped the steering wheel tighter. No, she could do this. He might be the quarterback for the champion Texas Tornado football team, but he was still human. He still put his pants on one leg at a time, just like she did. At least, she assumed he did, unless he had a butler who did that for him. But did people have butlers these days? And if they did they really allow someone else to dress them? Good grief, her thoughts had the attention span of a gnat today. The voice of her GPS brought her back to reality. Turn right on Lost Lake Road. Lost Lake Road. That was kind of ominous. She was getting close, though, and the thought sent her heart thudding in her chest. It was a beautiful road with gorgeous views. Blaine's cabin appeared to be rather secluded, so it would just be the two of them, alone, out in the middle of beautiful nature. Romantic, beautiful nature. Ah! Kenzi gripped the steering wheel as the car jostled her around again. Perhaps cruel, unpaved nature was a little more accurate. Lost Lake Road was hardly a road. Bumpy and unpaved, it wound through the middle of a growth of trees so thick that the sun above was obscured. She might even have to turn on her headlights to be able to see, even though it was the middle of the day. The contents of her lunch shifted in her stomach with the bumps. But finally she saw Blaine's red Mustang parked in front of a quaint cabin. It reminded her of the kind she used to build with Lincoln logs when she was younger, only this one had flower pots sitting in the windowsills, and a chimney that she could imagine smoke drifting lazily out of on a cold winter night. A cold, romantic winter night. The clump of trees nestled around it like they were guarding the cabin, protecting it. But Kenzi didn't get a scary vibe from it, more a feeling of tranquility. She parked the car and checked her hair in the mirror. She'd spent an hour on it this morning, trying to get it perfect, though the ride had undone some of her perfections. She didn't even know why she'd spent so much time on it. Was it because she was trying to get the job, or trying to get Blaine? Maybe the two went hand in hand. After giving her cheeks a quick pinch to add a little more color, she grabbed her keys and her laptop and headed for the door. Her spike heels immediately sank into the dirt. The sinking of her heels was not only coating her shoes, and therefore her feet, in dirt, but it was also offsetting her balance, giving her a stilted kilter of a walk up the path. She moved forward, putting most of the weight on her toes the way her mother taught her, the rest of the way. The air was warm, but as she raised her hand to knock, she wondered if she should have paired a jacket with her dress. Did she look unprofessional without one? She was not used to second-guessing herself so much. Her self-confidence wasn't high in every area, though she liked to pretend it was. But it hadn't been low in the area of fashion for quite some time. She'd found that love in high school and had often been the sought-after trendsetter. However, something about Blaine brought back the insecurities and fashion faux pas of middle school. She ran her hand down her dress one more time to smooth any wrinkles before rapping on the heavy door. The sound of footsteps reached her ears a moment before the door swung open, and Blaine, looking comfy in a t-shirt and cargo shorts, smiled at her. "You made it," he said with an easygoing smile that lit up his eyes. A girl could swoon looking into those big brown eyes. He leaned forward as if to hug her, but as Kenzi leaned in to meet him, he shifted his posture and the result was an awkward sort of shuffle that left her cheeks pink with embarrassment. She shifted her eyes to her laptop as she tried to regain her composure. I did. The directions were pretty clear, and my map app helped too. Great. Well, come on in. He stepped back to allow her entrance, and the masculine scent of him flooded her nose as she passed by. Dark and woodsy, she was unsure if it was his deodorant, cologne, or his natural scent, but what she did know was that it sent her heart thudding in her chest. She wasn't used to a man having this sort of effect on her. Normally it went the other way. She would go out with a man she thought she was attracted to, only to find out he didn't fit her ideal image after all, and she would end up breaking it off even though they seemed to really be interested in her. Was this what those men had felt like? This mix of nausea and elation? A feeling of regret flooded her. She certainly hadn't meant to make them feel this way. Though she was unsure if Blaine knew the effect he was having on her, she doubted it. He might avoid relationships, but he seemed like a decent guy. The door closed behind her, and then Blaine was beside her again. Would you like something to drink? I'm afraid I only have water. Water would be fine, she answered, as she looked around, following him to the kitchen. He must not use this cabin much if he didn't even have it stocked with drinks. The coating of dust on the bookshelves she passed bolstered that conclusion. The kitchen was a small room with barely enough space for two people to maneuver. Cozy, but slightly claustrophobic, Kenzi chose to stay near the table. Made from wood, the table appeared sturdy enough to withstand decades, and the scratches and worn areas in the top led her to believe it had been around a while. So, have you had this place long? Blaine shrugged as he opened a cabinet door and pulled down 2 glasses. It's been in my family for years, but I don't spend much time here. He looked around the room like he was looking for memories, that deep, dark look in his eyes. There was more to that story, wasn't there? But he wasn't ready to tell her yet. He handed her a glass, but didn't sit as he sipped from his own. He seemed uneasy. Was it her or the house? Would you like the tour? He asked suddenly. Sure. Yes, he was definitely nervous. Do you mind if I leave this here? She motioned to the laptop she had set on the table. It wasn't heavy, but there was no reason to lug it around either. Of course. He set his glass down on the table and then held out his hand to help her to her feet. She smiled at the gesture and placed her hand in his, but she was not expecting the heat that filled her palm. Her gaze caught his, and his wide eyes before he dropped her hands told her he had felt something unexpected as well. This way, he said as he shifted away from her. The cabin wasn't fancy, but it was fairly spacious. He led the way first to the large master bedroom that lay to the right of the kitchen. A rustic-looking bed and dresser were the only pieces of furniture in the room, but both appeared to be handcrafted, adding to the charm. The carpet was worn but not threadbare, and while she would like to replace it if the budget allowed, she could work with it if it had to stay. Kenzi could envision a rustic retreat, somewhere to escape to. Calming and serene colors and cozy bedspreads, it would be gorgeous. What do you want to do here? She asked as she walked around the room. She would take exact measurements later, but walking the perimeter always gave her an idea of the size she was working with. Plus, she would take pictures with her phone before leaving, in case she forgot anything. Honestly, I don't know. I'm probably going to sell the cabin when you're done renovating it anyway. Blaine leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed. Sell it? But it's so beautiful, and what an ideal place to come to get away from the hurry of city life. She couldn't imagine selling her family's lake house, if she ever inherited it. He shrugged. I don't have much time to get out here with my football schedule, so there's no real reason to keep it. But what about your parents or other family members? Won't someone want to keep it in the family? My parents never come here anymore, and there's no one else in the family who would want it. He bit his lip and frowned like he might want to tell her something, and she waited, expecting him to put his thoughts together. Instead, he said nothing more, and his brusque tone and manner caught her off guard. She'd only ever seen him happy and smiling. This was a whole new side. I get that. He nodded and shook himself out of his funk. So, what do you think? She looked at the room, her heart thumping. Well, I was thinking of making it a place you could relax in. A nice little getaway. I have some ideas. Are you opposed to landscape paintings? No. He offered a tender smile, as if realizing he'd been too abrupt before. Whatever you think is fine. Really, I didn't have anything in mind. I just know it needs something. Great. After I see all the rooms, we can work out a budget. He nodded and pushed himself off the doorframe. Across the hall is the main bathroom. It's small, but it works. Kenzi poked her head in and bit her lip. Small was an understatement. There was a tub with a shower attached, a toilet, and a sink. However, it was an old-fashioned one, so there wasn't even a vanity with storage, and the pieces were so close together that someone standing in the middle of the room could touch all three. There wasn't much she could do with this space unless he was open to tearing down some walls. Over here is a small laundry room. It has an exit to the back porch as well, so there's a place to take shoes off if they're muddy. There was no washer and dryer in the laundry room, only a basin and a sink, along with a shelf she assumed was used to fold clothes or hold detergent. She saw no other cabinets in the room. Okay, so running water, but no washer and dryer. That might be a challenge, but then again, people probably came out here to get away, so maybe they wouldn't mind having to wash their clothes by hand. Or maybe they would pack enough for however long they planned to stay. I'm not sure I'll be able to do much with this room or the bathroom, but I'll put my thinking cap on. He nodded. I'll show you the outside in a minute, but let's finish the rest of the inside. He headed back into the main area, where a terrifying staircase led the way to the loft upstairs. The steps were narrow and spaced too far apart. This might have to be replaced, especially if they wanted to appeal to families. Upstairs, there were another 2 bedrooms and a small bathroom, each decorated as simply as the master bedroom downstairs. At least it was a pretty blank palette to work with. In addition to the bedrooms, there was an open area that looked down on the main living room of the cabin. Kenzi could see it being a small playroom for kids or a comfy reading nook. She'd have to find out which direction he wanted to go. The main room was easily the largest part of the cabin, but it had no soul. There was no color tying it together, no pattern, no preference of any kind, but she could see how it could be an amazing space. It was large enough to hold 2 couches and a chair, as well as a coffee table in the middle. An ornate stone fireplace completed the look, and Kenzi could imagine curling up on one of the couches and watching the crackling fire for hours. If he were open to renting the cabin, she just might have to rent it a few nights herself. Maybe he would consider a night as part of her compensation. Ready to see out back? He asked, breaking into her daydream. Absolutely. She felt warmth spread on her cheeks as she followed him back to the utility room. Had he caught her mind wandering? Well, out back, he said, opening the door, is the lake. Kenzi stared in awe at the breathtaking view. She'd had no idea his cabin was on the lake. This would definitely offset the lack of a washer and dryer. Crystal blue water shimmered a mere 20 feet or so from the porch they stood on and stretched as far as the eye could see. Tall trees shielded every side of it, but the sun shone down in the middle, sending sparks of color across the surface. Wow, this is amazing. He only nodded, not able to bring himself to look at it. His eyes stayed focused on her, or the railing of the porch, never drifting out to the expansive blue beyond. Something must have happened here, but he was clearly not willing to discuss it right now. It killed her to think he would never enjoy this view, that this wondrous sight would be forever tarnished in his mind. Well, it certainly is the cabin's best feature. It's gorgeous. His answer was another shrug. He had shut down. Okay, well, I've got some ideas. Should we discuss the budget?